What if the biggest fight in the Beckham family was never really about family at all? What if this was always about power, influence, and a silent shift happening right in front of the world while nobody noticed? Because something doesn't add up. Brooklyn Beckham didn't just argue with his parents. He didn't just take his wife's side. He didn't just grow up and move on. He walked away from an empire he was born into and quietly stepped into another one. And the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. The legal letters. The wedding incident nobody can stop talking about. The total communication blackout. The prenup that raised more eyebrows than vows. And a billionaire father-in-law who has said absolutely nothing, yet somehow seems to be at the center of every whisper. Is Brooklyn finally free from a controlling past? Or did he simply trade one powerful world for another? Because insiders, old family friends, and even people from Brooklyn's past are starting to paint a picture that is far more uncomfortable than a simple family feud.
Yours is, you smell good. Your smile makes me very happy.
I thought that's
You're funny, very funny actually, and you're very hardworking.
Oh, I love you.
Very passionate about what you do, and I like that.
A picture about isolation, about influence, and about a choice that may have changed his life forever. So the real question isn't why Brooklyn left. The real question is, because once you start lining up the timeline, the pattern starts to feel less like a family disagreement and more like a slow, quiet transfer of gravity. At first, nobody noticed it. Brooklyn stopped showing up to random family dinners. Then he stopped appearing in casual photos. Then birthday wishes turned into silence. Then silence turned into statements. And suddenly, the Beckham family, the one the world saw as unbreakable, had a visible crack running right through the middle of it. But here's where it gets strange. This wasn't loud. This wasn't explosive at the start. This was quiet, controlled, almost strategic. Because while the public saw emotional posts and awkward headlines, behind the scenes something far more formal was happening. Communication didn't just become tense. It became legal. Reports began circulating that conversations were no longer happening directly. Messages were being filtered. Words were being chosen carefully. And at one point, a formal request allegedly asked that any discussion about Brooklyn be handled through proper channels only. Think about that for a second. Not through family. Through process. And that's when David and Victoria reportedly did something nobody expected. No PR teams. No public statements. No image management. They wrote a private handwritten letter to their son. Not to defend themselves. Not to argue. Just to ask if he was okay. People close to the situation say the letter was emotional, raw, and deeply personal. It didn't accuse anyone. It didn't demand anything. It simply tried to reach Brooklyn as parents, not as public figures. But instead of calming things down, everything escalated. Because days later, Brooklyn went public with a message that sounded final. Cold. Certain. Like someone who had already made peace with burning a bridge. He accused his parents of caring more about image than family. Of twisting narratives. Of disrespecting his wife. And most importantly, he made it clear that he had no interest in fixing anything. No, we'll work it out. No, family is complicated. Just a hard line in the sand. And that's when public opinion split right down the middle. Some people saw a man finally standing up for himself after years under the shadow of famous parents. Others saw something more uncomfortable. Because from the outside, Brooklyn didn't just step away from his family. He stepped entirely into another one. He began living, socializing, celebrating, and moving almost exclusively within the Peltz family circle. Events, holidays, appearances, all orbiting the same world. And people started asking a question nobody wanted to say out loud. Is this independence or replacement? Because while Brooklyn's connection to the Beckhams was fading, his integration into the Peltz world was becoming deeper and deeper. Then came the moment that everyone keeps going back to, the wedding. More specifically, the first dance. What should have been a simple emotional moment between a mother, a son, and a bride reportedly turned into the exact second the emotional damage became permanent. Brooklyn later shared that the dance meant for him and Nicola was unexpectedly taken over, leaving Nicola hurt and embarrassed in front of guests. People at the wedding say the mood in the room changed instantly. The joy drained. Smiles faded. Something shifted. It wasn't about music. It wasn't about timing. It was about pride, emotion, boundaries. And insiders say that for Nicola, that moment was the final straw. After the wedding, things were never the same again. Invites were ignored. Gatherings were skipped. Attempts to reconnect were met with distance. And slowly, a full communication blackout settled in. But here's where the story becomes less emotional and more psychological. Because Nicola didn't leave her world to join Brooklyn's. Brooklyn left his world to join hers. She remained close to her family, her support system, her environment, her independence, while Brooklyn, step by step, cut himself off from the only foundation he had ever known. And that's the detail that has people watching this situation very, very carefully. Because once you notice that shift, the rest of the story starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern hiding in plain sight. And at the center of that pattern is one man who has barely said a word publicly, yet whose presence is felt in every part of this situation. Nicola Peltz, a billionaire businessman known for precision, control, and calculated decisions. The kind of man who doesn't move emotionally, he moves strategically. People who follow elite families say something very interesting here. Nicola never distanced herself from her world after marriage. She didn't step away from her family. She didn't lose her support system. She didn't change her environment. But Brooklyn did. And that contrast is what has observers raising eyebrows. Because while love stories usually blend two worlds together, this one looks like one world quietly absorbing the other. Then there's the detail that made even neutral observers pause. The prenup. Before the wedding, Brooklyn reportedly signed a very tight agreement. Not unusual for billionaire families. Not shocking on paper. But the implications hit differently when placed next to everything else happening. Because if this marriage ever fell apart after Brooklyn had already cut ties with his parents, he wouldn't just lose a relationship. He would lose his entire safety net. No family to fall back on. No familiar ground to return to. No emotional or financial cushion waiting behind him. And that's the part David and Victoria's close circle reportedly find most worrying. Not the fight, not the statements, but the isolation. Because once someone's entire world becomes centered around one place, one family, one environment, their dependency doesn't have to be forced. It can happen naturally. And that's where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Then, out of nowhere, a voice from Brooklyn's past stepped forward. Not from Hollywood. Not from fashion. Not from the Beckham circle or the Peltz circle. From football. Brooklyn's former youth coach from his QPR days shared memories of the teenager he once trained. And his words didn't defend anyone. They didn't attack anyone either. They simply described a young boy growing up under constant pressure. Security guards at 14. Fame before identity. A childhood surrounded by cameras but lacking normalcy. He described Brooklyn as vulnerable. Not weak. Not manipulated. But vulnerable to influence. Vulnerable to wanting space. Vulnerable to wanting to breathe. And suddenly, this story didn't look like villains and heroes anymore. It looked like a young man trying to escape a life that never felt normal to begin with, and possibly running so far that he ended up in a completely different kind of structure. Meanwhile, his siblings remained close to David and Victoria. Still present. Still connected. Still comfortable in the family dynamic Brooklyn claims felt suffocating. Which creates another uncomfortable question people keep whispering. If the Beckham home was truly as controlling as Brooklyn says, why did only one child feel the need to walk away completely? That contrast is hard to ignore. And as this quiet war between two powerful families continues, the silence from Nicola Peltz becomes louder than any statement could ever be. No public defense. No interviews. No clarifications. Just silence. And for a man known to be sharp, aware, and deeply strategic, that silence feels intentional. And the longer this silence stretches, the more permanent everything starts to feel. Because most celebrity family feuds follow a predictable script. A public fallout. A long quiet phase. Then a soft reunion photo that breaks the internet. But this situation doesn't feel like it's heading in that direction. It feels structured. Locked. Almost formal. Conversations, if they happen at all, reportedly go through middle layers. Messages are filtered. Words are chosen carefully. The warmth that once defined the Beckham household has been replaced with distance that feels official. And that's what makes people uneasy. This isn't emotional distance. This is operational distance. Brooklyn insists he has no regrets. He says he finally spoke his truth. That he feels free. That he is standing where he wants to stand. But people who knew him long before the headlines, long before the marriage, long before the power dynamics, are quietly observing a version of him that feels different. More guarded. More distant. More absorbed into a world that isn't the one he grew up in. And the contrast between the two families keeps becoming more obvious. The Beckhams, built on legacy, public image, endurance, and tight family branding. The Peltz family, built on wealth, privacy, control, and business precision. Two completely different value systems. Two completely different environments. And Brooklyn standing exactly at the point where those two worlds collide. Online, fans argue endlessly. Some call him brave for stepping away from pressure. Others wonder if he stepped into a new kind of pressure without realizing it. Because when one person becomes your entire emotional anchor, the influence doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It can be quiet, comfortable, gradual. And that's why the question refuses to go away. Did Brooklyn choose this freely? Or did the slow shift happen so naturally that he didn't even feel it happening? Meanwhile, David and Victoria reportedly keep the door open. No public attacks. No harsh interviews, just a quiet message through friends and sources that their son is always welcome back. But coming back isn't simple anymore. Because returning wouldn't just mean repairing a relationship with his parents. It would mean navigating everything that happened in between. The statements, the silence, the sides that were taken without being officially declared. And then there's Nicola. Calm, steady, always present beside him. Never publicly escalating anything. Never fueling the fire. Which, depending on how you look at it, either makes her a protective partner or a silent center of gravity in this entire story. Perspective changes everything. Right now, the Beckham family exists in two separate realities. One moving forward together. One standing at a distance that feels harder to cross with each passing month. And the biggest question of all still hangs in the air. If Brooklyn ever decides he wants to reconnect, will the path back even be clear anymore? Or has the line been crossed so many times, so quietly, that nobody even noticed when it became permanent? Before you make up your mind about this story, take a second and really think about it. Is this a son finally breaking free from a lifetime of pressure? Or is this a quiet power shift that happened so smoothly nobody noticed it until it was too late? Do you see Nicola as a protective partner standing by her husband no matter what? Or do you think something deeper is happening behind the scenes between two powerful families? Because one thing is undeniable. This isn't just a family disagreement anymore. This is about influence, identity, and the kind of choices that can change a life forever. So now we want to hear from you. Has Brooklyn burned this bridge for good? Or is there still a path back to the family he grew up in? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you enjoy deep, dramatic breakdowns like this where we connect the dots others miss, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even bigger than this one.